Hello everyone, this is Heroes Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the Greatest Warrior Liu Bu lore series as we continue with part 5, titled Joining Liu Bei. So last time, we left off as Liu Bu was invited in by Chen Gong and Zhang Miao to replace Cao Cao as the governor of the Yan province. But to actually replace Cao Cao, Liu Bu would have to beat Cao Cao on the battlefield. As Liu Bu garrisoned the Yan province forces at the city of Puyang, Cao Cao quickly returned from his campaign against Tao Qian to put the city under siege. While Liu Bu gained the support of most of the gentry clans within the Yan province, there were still those who were loyal to Cao Cao, and one such clan would happen to be the Tian clan of Puyang, who would open the gates from the inside to aid Cao Cao in this battle. And as Cao Cao's forces rushed into the east gate of Puyang, the Qingzhou units that made up a large portion of Cao Cao's army quickly lit the eastern part of the town ablaze to create chaos and confusion to Liu Bu's forces. Yet due to Liu Bu's personal heroics and his small band of Bin province cavalry units, the Qingzhou forces were quickly shattered in the narrow streets of Puyang. And as the Qingzhou units routed out of the city, Cao Cao was also knocked off from his horse. As he used his hands to brace his fall, the surrounding burning debris would leave a mild burn on his left hand. But fortunately, aside from this minor injury, Cao Cao and his force would escape largely unharmed as they would retreat back to the city of Zhencheng. Then for the next 100 days, battle would continue, without giving either side a decisive result, and as these two forces stagnated, an external factor would break the tie, as the summer season of 194 turned out extremely dry, which started to affect the harvest before a plague of locusts arrived to completely decimate the crop yield for that year. Now, with no supplies for either side, the outlook started to look bleak for everyone, until Cao Cao's childhood friend Yuan Shao offered a lifeline to Cao Cao at this crucial moment. Now at this time, Yuan Shao had initially offered for Cao Cao to come join him in the north, or at the very least send his family to Ye, as the condition there would be a lot better. While this was a kind gesture, a move such as this would have essentially enslaved Cao Cao to Yuan Shao, as his family would become hostages used to control him. But with food running out and the military operation against Liu Bu looking uncertain, Cao Cao was tempted. Thankfully, Cheng Yu stepped in time to persuade Cao Cao to turn down this initial offer from Yuan Shao. And after relying on the goodwill from their childhood, Cao Cao managed to convince Yuan Shao to just resupply him through this tough time. And this resupply of food from the north would tip the scales, as in early 195, Cao Cao would win 3 consecutive battles against Liu Bu around the city of Dingtao. But Liu Bu's forces would muster up one final attack against Cao Cao during the harvest in 195, when Liu Bu and Chen Gong would lead a 10,000-man force to sneak attack Cao Cao at Zhencheng. And fate would have it that when Liu Bu's forces arrived, the majority of Cao Cao's army had already been sent out to the surrounding fields for the harvest. With less than 1,000 men left to defend the city, Cao Cao had to quickly come up with a plan. So immediately, the women left in the city were asked to man the city walls, as the last 1,000 troops were told to march out and look imposing. Now, to put a bit more context to the situation, to the west of the main gates is a long irrigation dam, and to the south is a dense forest. Both are great places for troops to ambush, and Cao Cao hopes that by giving off the appearance of strength, Liu Bu might be scared off from a direct assault out of fear that Cao Cao's main forces were lying in wait at these locations. And sure enough, Liu Bu ended up spooking himself as he would pull back temporarily to set up his own encampment for the upcoming siege. Then the next day, as Liu Bu once again marched up to the city, Cao Cao, who now had his entire army, ordered half of his infantry to sneak behind the irrigation dam to the west, while his entire cavalry circled around to the forests in the south. Then, with just half of his infantry, Cao Cao charged directly at Liu Bu's forces. And as these two forces collided, Cao Cao's ambush parties then charged out to attack. Tangled up with Cao Cao's initial infantry charge, Liu Bu's forces could not pull back, as the ensuing battle decimated Liu Bu's army and ended all hopes of victory in the Yan province. That night, Liu Bu and what's left of his force fled east away from the Yan province, and aside from the last remaining city guarded by Zhang Miao and Zhang Chao that still held, the Yan province returned back to Cao Cao's control. As for the fate of this last remaining city, Cao Cao would place it under siege for the next few months, as Zhang Miao would make one final attempt to look for reinforcements himself as he broke out from the encirclement to head south to Yuanshu in Shouchun. But not long after he left, the city fell, as Zhang Chao and the remaining members of the Zhang clan were all executed. Zhang Miao would also never manage to meet with Yuanshu, as while on the road, his own troops would betray and kill him. Now as for Liu Bu, he would flee east to the Xu province, with barely 1,000 men under his command. And by this time, Tao Qian had already passed away due to stress and old age, and Liu Bei, who had offered a helping hand in those last days, had won over the support of Tao Qian's officials as he was named the new governor of the Xu province. And with Cao Cao still a threat, the enemy of an enemy is naturally a friend. So Liu Bei took in a very thankful Liu Bu, as Liu Bu would invite Liu Bei over for a feast in his tent, where he had his wife and concubine come out to meet Liu Bei. Now, while this might sound a bit weird, but as we mentioned prior in our Sun Ce lore series, the act of meeting someone's wife or mother is seen as very private and respectful, and something that you would only do to a close friend. So Liu Bu was trying his best to express his thanks to Liu Bei. Thus, in the middle of 195, Liu Bu officially settled down in the Xu province to lick his wounds under the roof of Liu Bei. And in July of the same year, the opportunity of a lifetime would present itself for all the warlords of China, as a dispute between Guo Si and Li Jue had left the capital of Chang'an in chaos. And amidst this chaos, Emperor Liu Xie, along with Han loyalists at court, finally made their escape. And now, as they were slowly walking back towards the old capital Luoyang, help was needed immediately. As not long after Guo Si and Li Jue realized the emperor's escape, they quickly reconciled temporarily to join forces to try to recapture the emperor. Now, of course, we all know that Cao Cao would end up with the emperor, but did you know that initially, of all the warlords, the emperor wrote a letter to Liu Bu, commanding him to come to his aid? Well, this might seem a bit weird at first, but it actually makes plenty of sense. As the child emperor, after being forced by Dongzhuo to move to Chang'an, the only warlord he really knew at a personal level was Liu Bu, as he had been the one to assassinate Dongzhuo before ultimately being chased out of Chang'an by Guo Si and Li Jue. Unfortunately, Liu Bu simply did not have the manpower or the food needed to make the journey across Cao Cao's controlled territory to go save the emperor, as he would only be able to write back a letter explaining his hardship. Then once Cao Cao had secured the emperor and re-established the Han court in Xuchang, the emperor nevertheless rewarded Liu Bu by naming him as the general who pacified the east and the Marquis of Pingtao. Now, life under Liu Bei was going well for Liu Bu, but with Yuanshu's ambition growing in the Yang province to the south, war soon broke out between Yuanshu and Liu Bei. And while Liu Bu was not initially involved, a letter from Yuanshu would soon tempt Liu Bu into one final betrayal. And with that, we will end our episode here, as we'll return next time to look at Yuan Shu's influence on Lu Bu. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!